I'm very pleased to introduce Senator John Erpenbach. And sorry, I have to talk through my mask. I'll talk as loud as I can here. But Senator Erpenbach probably doesn't need an introduction. But for those who are on the call, just to make sure everyone knows who he is, he's a state senator for the 27th Senate District, which includes obviously New Glarus and all of the area of the school district. He's been in the state Senate since 1999. He was first elected in November 1998. Serves on a variety of committees, but for our purposes, the most important is he's the senior Democrat who serves not only from the Senate, but also from the Assembly perspective on the Joint Committee on Finance. And with the governor's budget introduction occurring last week, and the governor announcing a number of proposals for both public education and the university system, I think we thought it was going to be important to have Senator Erpenbach give us his perspective on the governor's budget, what the budget process is likely to look like in the Joint Finance Committee, and to the extent, Senator, you're willing to give a prognosis on the likelihood of success on portions of the governor's budget, that would be interesting as well. So with that, again, I'm very pleased to introduce Senator John Erpenbach. And John, we can't hear you, but we're working on the volume here, the sound.
Yeah, you can hear me now, right?
Yes, you can.
All right, thanks, Bill. Good to see you. Yeah, the governor did introduce his budget, and for K-12 education, I thought it's a great budget. For the UW system, it's a great budget as well, but specifically for K-12 education, just kind of like 30,000 foot view, it's about a $1.5 billion more in various school aids to K-12 education, and with a big emphasis on special education funding to the tune of about $700 million, which basically brings special education funding up to about 50%, which frees up more money, not only in New Glarus, but school districts around the state to take that savings that they'll have and plow it right back into the classroom. So overall, it's a good budget. The prognosis, I expect changes. For those of you who don't know, the Republicans control the not only the legislature but all the committees as well. So the Joint Finance Committee is controlled by both Republicans in the state Senate and in the state Assembly. So I do expect the governor's budget to change. I hope not, but I would imagine they'll be cutting from what the governor's proposed in K-12 education. It just depends on where the cutting will take place. But overall, for K-12, it's a great budget. But again, given Governor Evers' background, former state superintendent, school administrator, teacher, and so on and so forth, his life has been spent in public education. So it's not a surprise that not only his last budget, but this budget as well, K-12 education and funding, various categorical aids, trying to free up more money at the local level so school boards can decide what to do with it. I'm not surprised he did it in the last budget. I'm not surprised he did it in this
budget. And just given the membership of Joint Finance with Senator Darling stepping down as co-chair, new Senate Majority Leader with Senator Lamahu, do you, the Senate Republican caucus, taking a different view on the budget? Or are they likely to follow what they did last year, or 2 years ago?
I would tend to think it might be a little more of a conservative view on this budget than the previous budget. The budget's going to have to pass one way or another. It'll have to pass, and it'll have to be signed into law. And the sooner we pass it and get it back to the governor, obviously, the sooner it does become law at the end of the fiscal year, which is at the end of June. That being said, this budget might be a little more difficult to put together if you take it apart. Which I expect the Republicans to do piece by piece. There's a lot of things in there they don't like. And there's some policy stuff in there. Every governor, I've no bones about it. Every governor, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, has always put policy in their state budgets because it's kind of like their bully pulpit. They put the policy that's important to that administration. Again, whether it's a Democrat or Republican administration, they put some policy in the budget because that's what they ran on. That's what they said they would do on particular issue areas. But overall, a lot of the policy will come out. And then we get down to the funding. And K-12 education is getting a lot of money, and rightfully so. So I expect that funding to be under a microscope. The UW system is getting money as well, and I expect that funding to be under a microscope as well. And then there is one thing I think where both sides can agree on is there's more money for mental health, not only in schools, not only K-12 education, but all across the state of Wisconsin, with an emphasis on mental health in rural areas, which is extremely important right now. Well, it's an issue that's always been there, but we haven't really known about it simply because a long time ago we used to look at mental health as a totally different thing than what it actually is. It's an illness. It's something that people tend to need help with once in a while. In my mind, it's just like walking around with a broken leg. If you have a broken leg, you get it fixed. Nobody thinks twice about it. But on mental health, that stigma's kind of gone away, in part because whether it's a family member, a close friend, people have struggled with mental health issues, and they take on different forms, whether it's alcoholism, whether it's drug abuse, whether it's gambling, whatever the case may be. It's a situation that we as a society are looking at differently, and we want to help, but that costs money. It also gets to the point that we don't have a lot of providers in rural areas of Wisconsin. So this budget will help that. So I think that's an area we probably can agree on. But when it gets down to K-12 education, which is what I think you folks are really focused on, we're going to try and do whatever we can to keep what the governor has proposed in the budget. And again, we're going to have, despite the heroic efforts of not only the teachers, but the parents who had to stay home with the kids when schools are operating virtually, the administrators to turn on a dime and make the adjustments needed to make sure that the virtual classroom was viable. There's still going to be some catching up to do, and it's going to cost us some money. So I think, again, the idea of the governor putting in that kind of money in this budget, not only, again, is his priority, but it really underscores the need for us to try and catch up a little bit where we need to catch up.
And I'll ask one more question, and then the rest of the board certainly can ask questions as well. Senator, can you just talk a little bit about the joint finance process? It's a unique budget process, unique in that no other state follows that process, and get just a sense of the timeline.
Yeah, well, this is going to be unique. Obviously, this entire year and last year has been unique. A lot of challenges for everybody around the state and around the country. So normally what will happen is the governor introduced the budget. We have it now officially as a Senate and an Assembly bill. The Committee on Finance usually does what we call the road shows. We do about 4 or 5 road shows around the state of Wisconsin to various parts of the state to, just basically do as a committee a budget listening session. And those are usually held in just about the largest venues we can find given the location we happen to be at. So for example, if it's up in Superior, we'll probably be on campus in one of their big product programs. And then people from that part of the state come and testify what they like about the budget, what they don't like about the budget, what they want to change, and so on. And we listen, and we take notes, and we listen to the testimony. That's going to happen, but I'm not sure in what form yet. I really hope there is a virtual option because, Bill, I know you've been to a couple of budget road shows, and those auditoriums are packed, and they are packed with people out in the hallway. So when somebody gets there a couple of minutes to talk to the committee, they leave, somebody else comes in. So the auditoriums are always full, and the hearings can be 7, 8, sometimes 10 hours. But we stay there and we finish it up. So I hope there's a virtual option because you don't want it to turn into a super spreader type of a thing. And even in the legislature, we have our differences when it comes to the issue of wearing masks, which I wish we wouldn't, but we do. And the majority of us really do support wearing masks, but some people don't, and they don't necessarily think, they think COVID is a real thing, but perhaps not as serious as others are saying that it is. And that's just the reality of what we're dealing with, not only in the Capitol, but certainly around the state. So what will happen after the hearings is we start basically action on the budget, and you take it issue area by issue area. And what will happen is sometimes the Democrats will offer up changes to things that the governor has proposed. But a lot of the budget, I can tell you right now, we pretty much agree with the governor. what he's proposed, and we will obviously defend it and vote in favor of it. Because the Republican, the majority party controlling the finance committee doesn't like what the governor's proposed. They offer up the changes, and at the end of the day, they have the votes. And so we go through it agency by agency, and it takes forever. And then we get down to basically what's the last day, and we have what's called an omnibus motion, which is all sorts of things. The joke is it's omnibus because everything to get votes to pass the budget is on the bus, basically, is what it remembers. So that's where all of these magical things appear at the last minute, like an expansion to an airport up in Stevens Point, or a bridge in somebody's district, that kind of stuff. And that usually happens very late at night, and then next thing you know, the majority party has enough votes to pass the budget. And that hopefully will be, again, by, I expect it to be probably early June, certainly no later than the end of June. And then after that, the governor chooses to veto the whole thing, veto parts of it that he can, and sign it into law, or just sign it into law. So as a school board, you should have a pretty good idea what you were looking at roughly on K-12 education. Probably, I would say somewhere around early June to mid-June.
Good, thanks for that. Questions from the board or from administration as well?
Go for it, Deborah.
How is this motion 16 on the SR2 stimulus funding going to work?
I'm sorry, what?
Motion 16
Okay.
on the SR2 stimulus funding, how is that going to work?
I'm not familiar with that.
Oh,
I think I can maybe help on that. So I think that's the most recent SR2 stimulus funding that came through, and what came through, there was a proposal by DPI. And
I know what you're talking about. I'm sorry. Don't get technical on me. Just kidding. So you're talking about what we just did in finance a short time ago,
right?
Where DPI came up with this formula, and administrators had a pretty good idea of what they were looking at, but changes were made in finance. Basically, what happened was the Republican majority took about 10%, which is about $60 million or so, and decided to basically hand that out to schools who have been in physically, doors open, kids in classrooms, or have moved to that quicker than other districts. And it's their way of basically, there's two ways to look at this. You can make the argument a little bit that if the door's open, it's more expensive. You could also make the argument, which I see it as it's more punitive to those districts who are doing everything and anything they possibly could to make sure that not only kids were safe, but teachers were safe, and the rest of the staff were safe. So that's what ended up happening with that particular piece of the puzzle. And so as a result of that, DPI has to readjust their numbers. Was that what you were referring to?
yeah.
I hope. Okay.
That actually is on our agenda for later because it does impact our district quite significant.
Okay, so here's who really loses out on this. A lot of suburban school districts lose out on this.
Right.
I think most of the suburban school districts in my Senate district lose out on it. Wanakee loses, Middleton loses, you guys lose. I don't know, I think Heights might lose. But just about everybody in my district, suburban wise, loses out.
Yeah. Other questions?
Yep, go ahead,
Oh,
Larry.
Larry.
Thank you for joining us, John.
Sure.
My question is about Act 10. Do you see any progress being made on restoring some of the rights to unions that were taken away by Act 10?
In the current climate in the legislature, I don't. There were two groups of public employees that really were hit very, very hard by Act 10. And it's interesting. It was school teachers, and correctional officers. Um, you had a lot of experience, a lot of wisdom, a lot of know-how walking out the doors early, when they would have stuck around had Act 10 not been in place, and not only corrections, but certainly K-12 education. So I don't, as much as I want to see that restored, simply because the collaborative effort between management and the employees is extremely important, especially the public sector. That there are public employees who know where to save money when it comes to staffing issues. They have ideas on how to deal with it because they're the ones working, whether they're working on a floor in a classroom or whatever the case may be. Safety also is a huge concern, and the number of violent assaults due to staffing shortages in our correctional system went up. In some cases, went up pretty dramatically. Uh, Also, as a result, there were people who wanted to get into education, for example, as a career, but after Act 10 decided not to, and pursued something else. I know a guy who was a physical education teacher in a school district and a coach and just a Johnny Teddy Bear elementary school. Kids loved him. He's a plumber now. He spent a couple of years post Act 10 after he graduated college teaching and just didn't want to do it anymore. So I don't, again, foresee what the governor has proposed as actually even staying in the budget, first of all, but secondly, I don't see any legislation moving forward at all, even not, chip away isn't the right word, but to make Act 10 more workable, not only for, the state of Wisconsin, but certainly for our public employees.
Thank you for your hard work, John, and thank you
Thanks.
for the.
Other questions?
I'll ask one. Do you hear of any other bills that are being considered or circulated about education that, you think we should be aware of?
Keep an eye on the school choice stuff. That's something I would really keep an eye on. I would also keep an eye on, it ties directly now to K-12 education, having, still in the pandemic and school districts still using an in-classroom virtual kind of hybrid situation, is we can't put enough money right now into high-speed internet or broadband. We just simply can't. Every penny we possibly can find, and this is something we've been working on for a while. When I say we, Representative Considine, who comes from the northern part of the Senate district, and I've been working on for quite a while. It's frustrating to me that in this day and age, that no matter where you are in the state, you don't have access to high-speed internet. Not only at work, but at home as well. For some kids in certain parts of the state, their education ends the second they get off the bus. They don't have broadband at home, for example, or if they have an online assignment to do, they have to go back into the library and do it. And it's also really holding our economy back, especially in rural Wisconsin and in small town Wisconsin. There's stories, the stories are changing, but they're not changing fast enough. I think it was TDS who ran a line from Madison down through, I think it was Monticello, down to Monroe, and they didn't hook up Monticello. They just ran the line through Monticello. Eventually, they're doing it now, but I kind of view broadband, and I'll get back to choice here in a minute, but broadband is kind of like, electricity. Back in the day, they did the Rural Electrification Act, and if you turned on a light switch, no matter where you were going to have electricity. It's got to be the same thing with broadband. I mean, you've got some small businesses that could take off if they had access to broadband. You have small businesses that could start up if somebody in their basement had access to broadband who was working on a small business idea right now. So broadband is really, it's a great, you don't want opportunity. You want to make sure everybody has opportunity in Wisconsin. You want to talk about like the great leveler. It's broadband. It gives everybody opportunity. It at least gives them the opportunity for opportunity. Back on choice, we have a majority in the legislature that we just passed a resolution honoring, making it school choice week or whatever it was. There is a real, I don't know what the best word is. There's going to be a real attempt to really expand choice, and it'll be at at the budgets of K-12 of public schools. I mean, that's where the money's going to come from. So I would expect possibly in the budget an expansion of choice, which I hope would be vetoed. But I would really keep an eye on that, because again, the legislature, the majority party of the legislature has become more conservative with the newer members that were elected than previous legislative sessions that I've worked in.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anyone else?
And Senator, you've got a copy on a letter that we sent as a board to Secretary Timberlake about vaccination of teachers, and just
Yes.
our interest have been open for most of the time since last September. It's a priority for this board to try to get teachers vaccinated as early as they can, so that teachers don't feel like they're as much of a risk of getting COVID in the classroom. And we've done really, really well as a school district, but we also don't want to push our luck. And for those teachers who want to get vaccinated,
Right.
we would certainly urge the state to try to get them vaccinated as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think March 1st is when teachers will be eligible. That's the correct. You know, there's a legislator I work with who said everybody needs to be eligible by the middle of March. Well, okay, well, let's do that, but we don't have the vaccines, and we really need to prioritize those who should be prioritized. You know, senior citizens, if they were prioritized, that's a good thing. Some people who are not senior citizens with extremely touchy, very difficult pre-existing conditions. Teachers, anybody basically, who works with the public needs to be vaccinated. And I'm 100% in agreement with you that teachers need to be vaccinated as soon as possible. But that, again, comes down to the number of vaccines we're getting. We're getting more each week, which is a good sign. And part of the reason why we were behind early on is we weren't getting the amount of doses from the federal government that they said we were going to get. And in some cases, we got less than half of what we were told we were going to get for the first maybe the first couple of weeks to month rollout of the vaccines. You know, we were told we were going to get 70,000 doses. We end up with 30,000 doses, that kind of stuff. So that kind of really slowed us down a little bit. Plus, when the CDC kind of rejiggered how we can figure out who's going to get the vaccines, that helped things out a lot. But more and more vaccines are coming in, and more people obviously are being vaccinated. I think we are in the Midwest. We have to be about leading the way in vaccines per capita, and in the nation, I know we're in the top. I want to say we're in the top 10 or top 12 per capita. So it's starting to work here. It's just a matter of making sure we get our hands on as many vaccines as we possibly can. But like I said, I think teachers are going to be part of the rollout March 1st.
And Greene County Public Health has been trying to do it as best as they can. And when they have extra vaccine left at the end of the day, we're actually able to send teachers and other staff down to get those vaccines so they don't go to waste.
And that's great. And a lot of places are much smarter about that now. It's like, you know, they have kind of a waiting list, or they know who should get them and so on. And so although the vaccines have been given out that day and there are extras, because sometimes people have their appointments and for whatever reason can't get there, there's a lot of organizations that are really good about making phone calls right away saying, can you get down here within 45 minutes, kind of thing. And that's great that teachers and employers are being called on that.
All right, well, if there aren't any other questions, we really appreciate you spending time with us, Senator Erpenbach. We look forward to actually meeting you in person.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
But,
all right.
Appreciate you joining us virtually tonight.
Anytime. Good to see you guys.
Thank you.
Yep. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Bill, for organizing that. Appreciate it. Okay, we'll move on to the comment period. If you are interested in making a public comment, click on the participants icon on the bottom of your Zoom